Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the Supremely Enlightened One. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let's pay our respect to our teacher, Most Venerable Kiribati Punyānananda Thero Pingat Loku Sāmingāsa, for teaching us this Dhamma. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Meritorious devotees. So, today also we are going to learn a sutta. It's not a long sutta what we are going to learn today. It's somewhat short. I'm not sure whether I have done this before. Maybe I have. I'm not quite sure. So anyway, Buddha once said in a sutta, these beings of the world, they are shrouded by ignorance. The beings of the world are shrouded in ignorance. They are concealed, they are covered by ignorance. But they do not realize this. Why? Because of greed, because of stinginess and heedlessness. They do not realize this. Because being stingy means like all that you think of is to acquire certain things, no? And to protect what you have, to amass more and more things. It's all about gaining more and more. That's the nature of stinginess. So when people are focused only on this, that's normally how life goes for many people. So when this becomes the only focus in life, then you are heedless. Then you don't have time. You don't see the need to practice the teachings of the Buddha. Rather, you are running a race to gain more and more wealth, to acquire more wealth and property. So that is why Buddha said, people do not see this danger in life. Which danger? He said, because people are shrouded by ignorance, and because their stinginess, and because they are heedless, they fail to see the greatest danger in life. What is the greatest danger we suffer? We face in life? That is what? Suffering. The endless journey of rebirth. The woeful cycle of rebirth. Because of that we suffer. All of us. And we fail to realize this suffering. Why? Because we have one focus only in life, to acquire more and more sensual pleasures, to garner more sensual pleasures, wealth and property. So therefore, we don't see this. We are ignorant of this. So this ignorance is a huge factor in our lives. There is a particular sutta, Avijja Nivarana Sutta, where Buddha points out ignorance as a hindrance. Normally we know of the 5 hindrances. Okay, what are the 5 hindrances? Desire for sense purposes. What else?
Number two is ill will.
Ill will, yeah. Then vyapara, tīna midda. What is that?
Sloth and torpor.
Sloth and torpor. So the lazy and lethargic state of the mind and also the body, the sleepiness and all that, the drowsiness. So tīna midda, uddacca kukkucca. What is that? Regret and restlessness of the mind, no? Remorse and restlessness. Then what else? Doubt. Doubting the Dhamma, the teaching, the path. So these are normally what we call the 5 hindrances. But in this sutta, Avijja Nivarana Sutta, Buddha says like this: monks, I do not see a single hindrance hindered by which people wander in samsara for a long time, like the hindrance of ignorance. So he says here, the Buddha, I don't see a single hindrance that is more prominent than the hindrance of ignorance, by which the beings of the world wander in the samsara. Hindered by ignorance, people wander on one birth to another for a long time in samsara, said the Buddha. And he goes on to say, there is no another thing that hinders people like ignorance. Shrouded by delusion, they fare on day and night. That means they continuously fare on in the samsaric journey. Those who have given up delusion, shatter in the mass of darkness, wander no more. Who are they? The Arahants. The roots is not found in them. So they are the ones who are completely eradicated ignorance from their lives. So therefore the Arahants are not reborn again. All other beings, they continuously wander in samsara, an endless journey. So in this way, we have to see the danger we face in life. So ignorance is a main factor that affects our life. And how is ignorance fueled? What is the nutriment of ignorance? Anyone? What sustains ignorance in our life? What is ignorance?
Not understanding the Four Noble
Yeah.
Truths.
Lack of wisdom.
Not understanding the 4 noble truths, not understanding the noble truth of suffering. Dukkha jnana, dukkha samudaya jnana, we say. The cause of suffering, not understanding that. The cessation of suffering. And the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Not realizing these 4 noble truths, that is ignorance. And there is a separate sutta. It's called in Anguttara Nikaya, the book of the Tanks, you find it is called the Avijja Sutta. In that sutta, Buddha explains in this way. Because this is said, the first point of ignorance is not seeing such that before this there was no ignorance. And afterwards it came into being. You can't say this is where this began. Before the ignorance did not exist. You can't say so. Still, ignorance is seen to have a specific condition. So ignorance is also something that is conditioned. It's not permanent, it's impermanent. So that's what Buddha said. A first point of ignorance because it's not seen, so that before that there was no ignorance and afterward it came into being. That is not so. Still ignorance is seen to have a specific condition. So it is a conditioned phenomenon like anything else. So here Buddha said, I say because that ignorance has a nutriment. It is not without nutriment. So what is the nutriment? And what is the nutriment for ignorance, says Buddha? It should be said the 5 hindrances are the nutriment. Okay? That is why in the case of Arahants, they don't have hindrances. They have completely eradicated the 5 hindrances. So in their life, there's no ignorance, only realization, complete realization. So the nutriment of ignorance in this way is the 5 hindrances. So then Buddha says, and what is the nutriment for the 5 hindrances? Why do we have the hindrances within our life? What sustains the hindrances? What fuels the 5 hindrances? Yeah, very good. The 3 misconducts by body, speech, and mind. It is should be said, Buddha said, the 3 kinds of misconduct. The 3 kinds of misconduct too, said the Buddha, has a nutriment. They are not without nutriment. And what is the nutriment for the 3 kinds of misconduct? Why do we do evil actions, unwholesome deeds by body, speech, and mind? When do this happen? When we fail to do what? Sorry?
Absence of indriya samvara, Swami?
Yeah. When you fail to restrain your senses, then you may lie, you may steal. That's not the urge to steal comes when you see something and you suddenly desire that. So what faculty got unrestrained there? Which faculty? The eye, no? In that case, you see something and you want to have it. You are drawn to it. So likewise, when you lose the sense restraint, then you do evil deeds by body, speech, and mind. So then Buddha said this sense restraint also has a nutriment. It is not without nutriment. And what is the nutriment of for non-restraint of the sense faculty? Why does it happen? Why does it exist? The reason for that is lack of what? Mindfulness and wisdom. If there is no mindfulness, there is no wisdom, then you lose your sense restraint. And Buddha goes on to say there is also a reason why there for lack of mindfulness and sense restraint. What is that? It should be careless attention in the ayoniso manasikara, no? Lack of wise consideration or unwise consideration. That is the reason. So what is the nutriment, the sustenance for unwise consideration? What is the cause for that? Buddha says lack of faith. Lack of faith in the teachings of the Buddha. Because once you heard the teachings of the Buddha, if you wholeheartedly believe in those words, you will replace your unwise consideration with wise consideration. You will think according to the teachings of the Buddha. That's what happens naturally. So that is why it is when you lack faith, then there will not be wise consideration. There will be unwise consideration. Then Buddha goes on to say there is a nutriment for lack of faith also. What is this? It should be
Doubt.
saying not hearing the good Dhamma, the real Dhamma, the true Dhamma. If you fail to hear the true Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, that is, if you take up another view, another religion or another doctrine, then you will have unwise consideration, because that is not the path. That is not the truth of life. So then, that is why Buddha says, unwise consideration, the reason for is lack of faith. For lack of faith, the nutriment is not hearing the good Dhamma. Then not hearing the good Dhamma has its nutriment as well. What is that? What is the
Not-
nutriment for not hearing the good Dhamma?
Not associating with Kalyanamitta, one thing.
Yeah, not associating with noble friends, Kalyana Mitra, good persons. So then Buddha goes on to say, thus not associating with good persons becoming fills up not hearing the good Dhamma. Not hearing the good Dhamma becoming full fills up lack of faith. Lack of faith becoming full fills up careless attention or unwise consideration. Careless attention or unwise consideration becoming full fills up lack of mindfulness and clear comprehension or wisdom. Lack of mindfulness and clear comprehension becoming full fills up non-restraint of the sense faculties. When there is non-restraint of the sense faculties, then what comes into being? What? The three kinds of
misconduct.
misconduct by body, speech and mind. When there are the three kinds of misconduct by body, speech and mind, what happens? The five hindrances, they come to fulfillment. The five hindrances becoming full fill up ignorance. Thus there is nutriment for ignorance, and in this way it becomes full. So that is why people wander in the samsaric journey, because this process is happening continuously and ignorance is always there until a person comes across the teachings of the Buddha. What is he? Then it is only if there is a Buddha or the disciples of the Buddha you can talk of associating with the noble friends, Kalyana Mitra. If there is no Buddha's dispensation, we can't talk about a Kalyana Mitra. If there is no Kalyana Mitra, then can you talk about hearing the teachings of the Buddha? No. Then will there be faith? No. Will there be wise consideration? No. Unwise consideration. Will there be room for mindfulness and wisdom? No. If that is so, will be there sense restraint? No. Without sense restraint, all there would be is misconduct by body, speech and mind. Then we are again and again fueling the hindrances and thereby ignorance. That's what has been happening to us over and over again in the samsaric journey. That is why once we have come across the teachings, it is paramount that we should try to turn the tide and put a stop to this chain reaction, no? Sort of a chain reaction that's been happening in our lives throughout samsara. So Buddha says, so how to stop this? I say bhikkhus, I say bhikkhus that true knowledge and liberation, that is the goal, no? The liberation from this samsaric journey. Buddha says that is gained through what? They are not without nutriment. There is something supporting factor to gain that. What is that? It should be, say, the 7 factors of enlightenment. If you have fulfilled the 7 factors of enlightenment, then you gain true knowledge and liberation. What do you have to do to fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment? Then you have to practice the 4 establishments of mindfulness for that to happen. So for the 4 establishments of mindfulness to come to fulfillment, you have to practice the 3 kinds of good contact.
Kanda.
Yeah, by body, speech, and for there to be the three kinds of good conduct, there has to be what? Sense restraint.
Next one.
For there to be sense restraint, there has to be mindfulness and wisdom. For there to be mindfulness and wisdom, there has to be wise consideration. For there to be wise consideration, you should have heard the true Dhamma, the good Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha. For that to happen, there would have been what?
Noble friends.
Noble friends.
Yeah.
So that you have now. So that you know what you are supposed to do. You have to listen to the Dhamma from the noble friends, the Kalyana Mitra, and gain confidence, faith in the Buddha. If you have faith, then you begin to think and contemplate along the teachings of the Buddha. That is what? Wise consideration. If you have wise consideration, then you will have what? Mindfulness and wisdom. If you have mindfulness and wisdom, then as a result, you will have what? Sense restraint. When there is sense restraint, then there is what?
Three kinds of
Good conduct by body, speech, and mind. When there is good conduct, then you can practice the four bases of mindfulness, four establishments of mindfulness. Kayanupassana, Vedananupassana, Chittanupassana, Dhammanupassana. Okay, when the four establishments of mindfulness, they gradually come to fulfillment, then the seven factors of enlightenment gradually comes into fulfillment. When that happens, then you gain true knowledge and liberation. That's how it happens. That is why we learn the Dhamma. Okay, so that is not the sutta, that is the Avidya Sutta. So the sutta we are learning today is the Vitakka Santana Sutta. Okay, so here we learn no ignorance exists because of what? The five hindrances. They are the nutriment for ignorance. So if we practice according to this sutta, the hindrances will never get fueled. Also, you can practice the four establishments of mindfulness and also thereby gain the seven factors of enlightenment and also true knowledge and liberation. So for a meditation, a person who we say in Pali, Adhichitta Maniyuttena, who is looking to develop higher state of mind, develop the mind, this sutta is very important, the factors we discuss in this sutta. So this is how the sutta begins. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living in Savatthi. So the Buddha was living in Savatthi at that time in the Jaitas Grove, Anathapindika's parks. So he addressed the bhikkhus and said, because when a bhikkhu is pursuing the higher mind, that is Adhichitta Maniyutta, pursuing the higher mind or looking to develop the mind through meditation, from time to time he should give attention to five signs. What are the five? There are five things a monk who is looking to develop his mind should pay attention to. He should pay attention to these five signs. What are these signs? Buddha said the first one is, here bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu gives attention to some sign and owing to that sign there arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, connected with hate or delusion, then he should give attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome. So normally think of our life, we have the six internal senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body and mind. Then there are the external sense faculties. What are those? Forms, sounds, orders, tastes, tangibles, and the mind objects, thoughts, simply. So then for the six sense faculties, they become the external objects. So that's what is being said here. When a bhikkhu gives attention to some sign, that means when from your eyes you see forms, from your ears you hear sound. From your nose you smell odors. From your tongue you taste things. And from your body you touch, you come into contact with certain things. And of course there are thoughts. Likewise, in me you interact with the external sense faculties. When this happens, Buddha says, and owing to that sign, that means whatever external sense faculty, that there arise in him evil unwholesome thoughts. That means when you see a form or hear sound or smell or odor, there can arise within you some unwholesome state stemming from greed, anger, or delusion. Now, doesn't that happen to us on a daily basis? It does happen, no? All the time actually. Because when we interact with the external sense bases, when we see, hear, taste things, when we experience life as it is, because of this interaction, or into any one of these signs, they arise within us, the defilements. And all the defilements stem from what? Greed, anger, and delusion. Then Buddha says, now first you have to understand that it is happening. What? Mindfully you understand, when I see this form, there have arisen lust in me, or they have arisen anger within me, or jealousy. When hearing this sound, anger arose within me. Say someone calls you, you realize that this is happening. First you have to understand, okay, now anger has arisen within me. Because in the beginning it may not be gross, it is very subtle, and you may not realize that you are getting agitated, and slowly you get worked up. That is why it's very important that you are mindful right from the beginning, that you first realize that this is happening within you. Okay, now anger is growing with me, growing in me. You realize that. So the Buddha said here, when he realized this, that an unwholesome thought has arisen within him, then he should give attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome. Because seeing some form or hearing a sound, if there arose anger with him, he should understand that, and he should what should he do? He should switch his attention to something that is wholesome. Okay, say now, because someone comes and scolded you, that is a sound. Because of that hearing that sound, then anger arose within you. So now you are always thinking of that person, thinking of its expression, thinking of the things he said, and you might even think of things, all the bad deeds he has done in the past to harm you. Likewise, there is the whole thought process, and that makes you more and more angry, no? Because how does anger arise within a person? Because two things: patigha nimitta and ayoniso manasikara. That means the thing connected, whatever thing that is causing you anger, that we call the patigha nimitta, the sign of anger, the object of anger. Then there is what? Unwise consideration. When these two things come together, anger grows within you. First, you mindfully realize that this is happening. Then what you do is you switch your attention to something wholesome. Like what? Like loving kindness. You are switching your thoughts, because thought is also an external sign, external sense faculty. You are switching to thoughts, good wholesome thoughts, thoughts of loving kindness. Then what happens? Gradually anger begin to subside. Buddha said, when he gives attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion are abundant in him and subside. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Why is this important to this person? Because he is a meditator. He is trying to purify the mind. He is trying to develop the mind. So his sole focus in life is to purify his mind, to stifle the hindrances. So he is always focused on cleansing his mind. So he is ever so mindful. And when the moment arises, when the defiled states, the unwholesome states arise in his mind, he mindfully understand, and he understand, okay, because of this sign, there arose anger, there arose lust with me. He switches his attention to something connected with the wholesome. He practice loving kindness. Or if it is lust, what does he do? You have to understand how lust arises within you. What are the two factors that support lust? How does lust arise within you? Huh?
Subha nimitta, Bhante, and ayoniso.
Yeah, Subha Nimitta and Ayoniso Manasikara. You view something as pleasant, the pleasant sign, and then unwise consideration. When these two things come together, lust arises and grows within you. So then you have to replace unwise consideration with wise consideration. Or Subha Nimitta with Asubha Nimitta. You have to think of that thing being foul, how that thing is subject to impermanence, how that pleasant thing changes over time. When you are able to do that, you are replacing unwise consideration with wise consideration. Then again, lust subsides. The hindrances are not fueled. Then the mind gets what? Normally, when there arises defilements, anger, lust, or any other defiled state in your mind, what happens? Your mind becomes restless. But when you do the opposite, when you switch your attention to something connected with the wholesome, then the mind gets steadied internally, get quieted, calm, and peaceful, and concentration. That is why it is very important that you do this. Like meditation is an extension into life. If you meditate for a while and once you stand up, if you let go of your mindfulness, then you are letting in all the garbage. Then again your mind is defiled. That is why it is a continuous practice to cleanse your mind. Throughout your day, you have to be mindful and be aware of these unwholesome thoughts arising with you. So that is the first way by which you abandon the unwholesome and instill yourself in the wholesome. And the Buddha gave a nice simile to this. What is the simile? Just as a skilled carpenter or his apprentice might knock out, remove, and extract a coarse peg by means of a fine one, so too when we see an unwholesome state arise because of a certain sign, he switches his attention to another sign connected with what is wholesome. So the simile is, think of a plank and there is a nail driven into the plank. And how do you normally remove a nail from a plank? How do you do that? You use a tool. No, in this case there is no tool. No tool. You have only a finer nail, because a coarse peg and a fine one. The coarse peg represent what? The unwholesome state, because it's gross. What is the fine peg? So you are given another finer nail to remove a nail. Is that an easy task for a person? No. You don't have any other tool. You don't have a hammer or whatever. You have to use another fine nail to remove a coarse peg. So that in itself is a difficult task. So the final nail here is the wholesome state. Somehow you gradually remove the unwholesome state from the mind. So that's the simile. So if you remember the similes, it's helpful for you to understand. And also remember the sutta itself. So that is the first thing you can do. Okay, then Buddha goes on to say, if while he is giving attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, there still arise in him evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire. Though he is doing that, he is switching his attention to something wholesome, still he can't stifle the defilements. Still they would crop up. That can happen, Buddha says. Then he gives the second solution. Then Buddha said, then he should examine the danger in those thoughts in this way. How do you examine the danger? These thoughts are unwholesome. They are reprehensible. They result in suffering. You have to think of the danger of anger, danger of harboring lust. We read in papers what people have done in anger. They have killed, murdered, and they fall in jail. And people, young people, ruin all their lives because of one momentary anger. And because what people do because of lust, sexual harassment, rape, and all these things we see. Why? Because of this. Because of people do not see the danger in engaging in these misdeeds. What is the danger? You have to suffer the consequences. In this life, you suffer when you are fined, when you are caught by the authorities, you are put in jail, you suffer in this life. You destroy your family life because of sexual misconduct and stuff like that. Why? Because of the defilements. You fall into these troubles. And then afterlife, next life, what happens? You have to suffer in hell worlds. No, that's what happens. Because Buddha said, no, a person in the Apaya Sangattanika Sutta, what happens to a person who kills living beings? And he continues it, he does it more and more. He, after death, he is born in hell. Same for the one who steals, engages in sexual misconduct, who lies, speaks devisely, engages in idle chatter, all of them. If they do it extensively, after that they are born in hell world. Then in the case of living beings, like a person who kills living beings, if he's born in the human world, what is the result of that? Say he goes into hell, then there is the residue of the karma. He's born in the human world. How does it come to affect? For a person who's killed living beings, what happens then?
Short life.
Short lifespan. In the case of stealing, what is the residue karma? If he does, he's reborn in the human world.
Poor. He will
Sorry?
become poor. He will become poor. If he steal, no.
No. Stealing, what happens? Someone? His property, wealth and property, he will lose it. It will be
Oh, okay.
destroyed. He can't protect it. Okay?
Okay.
Then sexual misconduct, what happens? If that is the case. You are born in hell. Haven't you heard this sutta?
Yes,
Apayasangatana
Bhante, but
sutta?
we forgot. Yes.
These are the dangers. Sexual misconduct. Because if you don't know the dangers, when these unwholesome states comes into your mind, like how do you like try to get rid of them? You have to contemplate upon the dangers. To do that, you should know the dangers. In the case of sexual misconduct, you will have a lot of enemies in life. You know, that's what happens, because when you break up a good marriage, you create a discord within that family. You are creating enemies. What you create, you get in life. So in your life, you will have many enemies. If you have committed sexual misconduct in past lives. And if you are a person who has lied a lot, what happens? Then you are falsely accused in this life. False accusations. You will have to face them. Then what about divisive speech? Because with divisive speech, you break up people, break up friendships. Likewise, friends, you will not have friends. Friends will leave you. Friendships will be lost as a result. And what about harsh speech? If that is the past karma, what happens in this life? You will not hear endearing speech, speech that is that you want to hear. Loving speech, that is not a thing you will get in this life. You will get harsh speech. Idle chatter. If a person extensively engage in idle chatter, what happens? Of course, he is born in the hell world. Then, once he is born in the human world, the residue of the karma, how will that come into effect? What will happen? No one believes in your words. There is no value in your words. No one would listen to you. No one will pay heed to your words. Why? Because that past karma, idle chatter. So likewise, you have to contemplate upon the danger. Because just harboring a thought, in the time of the Buddha, there was a case, there was a certain lord. His name was Sorayaka. He was going to, one day he was going to the river to bathe, and along the way he saw this very handsome monk. It was Arahant Kachana. He was he's a very beautiful figure, very attractive figure he had, and his skin was golden colored. So the moment this Lord Sorayaka saw the Arahant, there arose lust within him. As opposed to, that is not the normal feeling you would see had seen a monk. There arose faith and wholesome states of mind. In his case, there arose lust, and he began to think, what if my wife were this beautiful? Or if I had a wife that was as beautiful as this monk. Likewise, he was having lustful thoughts of an arahant, not just a person. So the karmic effect was immediate. Then and there, his all his manly signs were lost from his body. His manhood and all the physical features of a man were lost, and he became a woman. Now, can he go back to his former life? Can he go back to his wife and children? Can he live as the Lord in the village? He can't. Out of shame, he left the village, and he went far, far away. And he's now a female, not a gent. And he remarried another Lord as a she. He remarried, and then he had kids there. Another family, she had kids with that husband. But still, she suffered mentally a lot because of what had happened. And one day she tells this to her husband, and the husband felt really sorry for her. And they came in search of Arhant Kachan and asked for his forgiveness. The moment of course, the Arhant Kachan, he doesn't know that such a thing has happened. And he felt really very sorry and sad for her state, and he forgives that lady. And then again, that very moment, the moment she was forgiven, she transformed back to a man. And then he ordains in the Buddha's dispensation and became Arahant in the end. So that is the danger of harboring unwholesome thoughts in the mind. He didn't engage in sexual misconduct. No, the Lord Sorayaka. He was just thinking thoughts. But see how the karma is created. So that is why we have to be very. So you can think, no, if a person who is watching porn, how the karma is created in his life and how he will have to suffer at that moment. Because that is something that is happening. The consciousness is affected in that way. So likewise, you have to think of the repercussions, the consequences. Then only you will be able to abandon the unwholesome. That is why Buddha says here, then he should examine the danger in those thoughts. These thoughts are unwholesome, they are reprehensible, they result in suffering. It's true, that is the truth of it. When he examines the danger in those thoughts, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate and with delusion are abandoned in him and subside. When you see the danger of harboring those thoughts, then anger will have no place in your mind. It will abandon. Lust will abandon. Delusion or any other defilement that is there, they will abandon because you are seeing the danger of them. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied, internally quieted, brought to singleness and concentration. So, your mind is purified. The defilements, they do not exist, they are abandoned. So, there is a constant purification process that is going on. You are always guarding the mind, protecting the mind, cleansing the mind, a continuous effort where there is always mindfulness, always there is effort coupled with wisdom. Where do you get the wisdom? From the teachings of the Buddha. It is the Buddha who guides you. You do this. If that doesn't work out, try this. So there are the options. The teachings are there. It's up to you to put them to practice. So then again, in this way, the mind gets steadied and peaceful and calm. And Buddha gives a nice simile. Just as a man or a woman, young, youthful, and fond of ornaments, would be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted if the carcass of a snake or a dog or a human being were hung around his or her neck. So too, when a bhikkhu examines the danger in those thoughts, his mind becomes steadied, internally quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Just like a person, a boy, a man or a young man or a woman, who want to look nice, look beautiful, would wear ornaments and they want to look the best as possible. What happens? A person comes and hangs a carcass of a dog or a human or a snake. Would they think, okay, I'll get rid of this later? Or would they then and there be reprehensive of that and throw it away? They wouldn't want to, even for a moment, for those carcasses to be on they're hanging it on their neck, no? Yeah. Hung around his or her neck. They will then and there cast it. So that sort of repulsiveness should be there with regard to the unwholesome states that arise in your mind. You should not harbor them even for a fraction of a second. Why? Then you stink. No? Then you stink, you reek of that smell. What smell? The unwholesome state, the defilements. You reek of the defilements. So you don't let that happen. Just like the youth, they would discard the carcasses, you have to discard that unwholesome state that crops up in your mind. So that is what you have to take from the simile. You see how strong the message the Buddha gives here. From the simile you can understand. So in this way, that is the second method by which you can abandon the unwholesome and instill yourself in the wholesome. Then Buddha says, if while he examines the danger in those thoughts, there still arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate and love. Still that may not work out. Okay? First you try to switch the attention from something connected with unwholesome to something connected with wholesome. That might not work. Then you try the second thing. Think of the danger of harboring the unwholesome thoughts. Then again, that might still not work, said the Buddha. Still the unwholesome, the defilements may rise, may come to the surface. So see, it's never easy. Even in the time of the Buddha, this is how it was done. You have to put in the effort. You have to keep on fighting with the defilements. Because we might think, oh, of course, if we were in the time of the Buddha, it might have been easy going for us. just the Buddha teaches and we realize it's likewise as we read in the suttas. But that's not how it works. For the majority, it's hard. Why even in the case where the monks quickly attain the fruits, they had put their effort in past lives. In past lives, they have made the commitment. Therefore, now they in that life in the Buddha's dispensation they reap the benefits, because in the samsara in previous dispensations they had gradually developed the wisdom, developed the faculties, the qualities necessary to realize the Dhamma. So that is why if you put an honest effort into the practice in this life, surely the benefits will be there. That's a given. So that is why we encourage you to somehow, we all of us should try to practice the teachings to whatever extent that we are able to do it. That will not be lost on us. It is an investment. One day we will have the rewards from. So if that doesn't work out, Buddha says the third thing we can do is, Buddha says, when unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion arises in him, he should try to forget those thoughts and should not give attention to them. Okay? You just forget about it. Say now think like the thoughts that like you can be in a very good peaceful state of mind. Suddenly there comes to your mind of a past incident. Okay? That is very hurtful in your life. Something bad a person did to you. And if you keep thinking along those lines, if you keep reminiscing of that incident, you can experience the same thing, no? As that person is hurting you this very moment. Say someone scolded you way back, some years back. Even still, if you think of that moment, you relive that moment, the pain is still there. Doesn't that happen? You can feel that pain. Why? Because the mind is connected with something unwholesome. So that is why Buddha says, just when this has to be done in the right beginning, the very moment you feel an unwholesome, your mind is getting connected with something unwholesome, you have to forget that thought. You shouldn't pay attention to it. You should not pursue it. Then and there you abandon that thought. All of these things Buddha teach in this sutta, these are certain skills, certain things that mind can do, that we can use, certain tools that we have within ourselves that we can use to abandon the unwholesome. One such aspect of the mind is with this mind we can stop thinking of certain things. We just drop that thought. Just like that. When he tries to forget those thoughts and does not give attention to them, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate and with delusion are abandoning him and subside. Think of like you had an affair with a girlfriend or boyfriend, fiance, whatever, past affair. Now you have broken up. When you think of that person, it can be either lust or it can be a hurtful feeling if it's a breakup. Then the moment that thought comes to your mind, if you stop thinking of that person, that helps. Without pursuing, in the beginning it may be difficult. Okay? Still that thought might be coming to your mind again and again. But if you practice gradually, there comes a moment when your mind is strong. You can then gradually, not when the moment it comes in your mind, you should drop it. Then if you are able to do that again and again, you will see that gradually, because whatever the way that you train your mind, that is why Nama Rupa we say, like the way the mind is Nama Rupa and the consciousness, they are supported by each other, no? So Nama is name, Vedana, Sanya, Chetana, Passa, Manasikara, the things we think about, what we feel, what we perceive, all the attention we give. If all those things are connected with that particular person, then quickly either hurt or lust or anger arises within. Why? Our thought process, the perception, the feelings, all of those things are connected with that person. So if we train ourselves not to think of that person, think of something else, then you can gradually train your mind according to the teachings of the Buddha, so you are not drawn to these unwholesome states. The practice is important in this case. So likewise, that is a skill, an ability of the mind, that you can stop thinking of certain things. That is what Buddha says to use in this instance. When he tries to forget those thoughts and does not give attention to them, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate and with delusion are abandoned in him and subside. And then again the mind gets steadied, quieted internally. Okay. And the nice simile is here, just as a man with good eyes who did not want to see forms that had come within range of sight would either shut his eyes or look away. That's what we do know. If we see something that we don't want to see, we either look away or shut our eyes. Likewise, Buddha wants you to shut your mind from the unwholesome, things that hurt you, things that cause lust, anger, the defilements. You should stop thinking of them. Shut them out. That's what Buddha says here. Okay, that's a simile. By doing that, you can also abandon the industry. So you can abandon the unwholesome and quieten your mind. Make your mind calm, peaceful, and concentrated. Then Buddha said, fourth aspect, the fourth thing you can do. If while he is trying to forget those thoughts and is not giving attention to them, they are still arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion. Still those defilements can crop up. So then what is clear is there has to be a relentless effort. A continuous striving has to be there, or else you cannot cleanse your mind. So if that doesn't work out, what you have to do, Buddha says, is then he should give attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts. When he gives attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion will subside. What does it mean? Stilling the thought formation. So for there to arise a defiled state in the mind, there's a process, no? So think of an incident where, as we discussed, you get angry because someone scolded you. So what's happening there? There is the ear, then there is a sound. You are not talking about a person, it's just your ear, a sound you heard, and therefore there arose within your ear consciousness. And the unification of the ear, the eye, and the ear consciousness, that is ear contact. Because of that ear contact, which turn out to be an unpleasant feeling, unpleasant contact, there arose within you an unpleasant feeling. And because of unpleasant feeling, then there arose within you unpleasant perception, unpleasant thoughts. There is the thought process. That is how these defiled thoughts came into mind. Thoughts of anger, thought of lust. Likewise, you break it down. You inspect. You investigate as to what happened. The thought formation. You break down the thought formation. And you see this is a conditioned phenomena. Because of unpleasant contact, there is unpleasant feeling. Contact is impermanent. Why? In this case, the ear is impermanent, the sound is impermanent, ear consciousness is impermanent, therefore ear contact is impermanent. Ear feeling, because of that, is impermanent. The perceptions is impermanent. The thought process, the thoughts, the intentions are impermanent. Then you are seeing the conditioned phenomena. Normally we don't see this. We see what? We observe this through self-view, the personality view. And we feel that person scolded me. we think of ourselves as a whole, an entity, rather than not breaking this down, the process. There is no person, me, mine, myself, rather an eye, an ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, which are all conditioned. Then the external senses also conditioned. The consciousness that arises also conditioned. The contact that arises also conditioned. Likewise, the feelings, the perceptions, and thoughts. You break down the process, then what happens? The mind gets calm, peaceful, concentrated. That is the fourth way by which you can abandon the unwholesome. Then Buddha says, he gives the simile, okay? Just as a man walking fast might consider, why am I walking fast? What if I walk slowly? And he would walk slowly. Then he might consider, why am I walking slowly? What if I stand? And he would then stand. Then he might consider, why am I standing? What if I sit? And he would sit. Then he again thinks, why am I sitting? What if I lie down? And he would lie down. So likewise, what's happening here? A person with a gross posture is gradually changing his posture to one that is more subtle. Likewise, gross posture is like the unwholesome state that arises in your mind. Then you break down the process. What happens? It becomes more and more subtle. And you calm down. Just as the person lies down, your mind get calm and concentrated. And you can, from a state of unwholesome, you gradually bring your mind down to a state of wholesome. Why what? By doing what? Stilling the thought formation. That is the simile there, okay? By doing so, he would substitute for each grosser posture one that is more subtle. Likewise, you substitute the grosser state of the unwholesome with the subtle state of the wholesome by stilling the thought process. That is the fourth method that you can use to abandon the unwholesome and to establish yourself in the wholesome. Fifth and final thing you can do, Buddha points out, is even if this doesn't work out, Buddha says, if while he is giving attention to still in the thought formation of those thoughts, they are still arising in him, evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion. Then what he is supposed to do is, with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, he should beat down, constrain, and crush mind with mind. So here there is a physical aspect also. What is that? You have to, you have to clench your teeth and press your tongue against the roof of your mouth, and should beat down, constrain, and crush mind with mind. When with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, he beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with his mind. Then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion will abandon and subside in him. So that is something also you can try. I remember like our teacher Lok Saingan once said, like he had this experience where he had been in the forest meditating with another monk, and they were in the dark in the forest. They didn't have electricity or whatever. So in the dark, the two of them were meditating in the same kuti, and Lok Saingan actually heard this teeth clenching sound from the other monk who was in meditating. Like this way back 20-25 years, and he was scared, like in the darkness, what's going on with this person. And then somehow after some while, he was able to find a torch, and he lit up the torch and said, asked, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Then that other monk said, no, I was able to tame my mind. So that's what he had been using. He had been using the fifth method to do meditate, and he was able to attain the jhanas very easily thereafter, because this worked for him. This method actually worked for him. Even Buddha used this method, like when he was doing self-mortification before enlightenment. So anyway, even for monks, this method also worked out because we don't know, it might not work for us, for some it might. So the thing is, we can't figure out what works for me might not work for you. So it's first what you have to do is to figure that out. You have to gradually go through all 5 processes. Try the first, second, third, fourth, fifth. A few may work for you, some might, you never know, all 5 might. So something is going to work out, that's for sure. So you have to go through this in a methodical order without just dropping it, and give it some time for you to figure out. Stay with one for quite time and keep on practicing, and over time you can figure out for yourself what works most for you. And for a certain defilement, you may find certain thing works, not the other. Anger you might be able to abandon by metta. Maybe in the case of lust, you can just forget it. Like it's different for each person. You can't say this is what works and what doesn't work. So it's up to you to figure out what works for you. So in this way, that is something you can do also. And the simile Buddha gives here is, just as a strong man might seize a weaker man by the head or shoulders and beat him down, constrain him and crush him, so too, when with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, the bhikkhu beats down, constrains and crushes mind with mind. His mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. So like just as a strong man might seize a person, weaker person, and wrestle him down. The strong man here represent effort, your effort. Weaker man is the unwholesome state that arises in the mind. So you have to be the powerful person. Not normally when an unwholesome state arises in the mind, you should give in. Look, I am helpless. You don't have to be helpless. You have to believe in the teachings of the Buddha. You don't have to believe in yourself. You have to believe this is proven, practiced and proven. The results have been gained. There have been many arhats, many who gained fruits of the path by practicing this. This is what they practiced even in the time of the Buddha. So these 5 methods, if you practice, you can reap the benefits. At least if you try, keep on practicing, trying, one day you will definitely benefit from it. Even if it is not in this life, it will not be in vain. So in this way, you can use these 5 methods. So because we have to understand when it comes to the practice as a whole, it is different for each person. So we know there Buddha said there are like 4 types, 4 groups of people. No, Sukha Patipada Kippa Binya. For some, the training is very easy and realization comes quickly. Like in the case of Arahant Sariputta. Training easy means like he or she finds it easy to keep the precepts. And meditation is easy. He is quickly able to subdue his hindrances and develop meditation, attain jhana even. That comes easily. For some, it is not so. So like in the case of Arahant Sariputta, it was easy for him. Sukha Patipada Kippa Binya. Meditation came easily and realization came quickly. You know, he realized the Dhamma not while in meditation, when he was fanning Buddha. No? So likewise, it came easily, the realization. So likewise, for some that is so. For some it is Dukkha Patipada Kippa Binya. Like in the case of Arahant Moggallana. For some that like to keep the precepts, to practice meditation, that may be difficult. That like in the case of Arahant Moggallana, he find it difficult to, in the beginning, to attain samadhi, attain concentration. He fell asleep when he was in meditation, and Buddha gave him some certain advices. In the Pachalayana Sutta, I can read the sutta to out to you, but I don't think we have you read the sutta? Pachalayana Sutta? Don't think we have time to, you can read the sutta, okay? Where Buddha gives some advice to Arahant Moggallana as to how to get rid of sleepiness. So in the case of Arahant Moggallana, it was Dukkha Patipada Kippa Binya. But once he was able to practice meditation and attain the jhanas, he quickly realized. Then there are the people Sukha Patipada Danda Binya. That means they keeping the precepts and meditation, it is easy. Even nowadays, there may be people who find meditation easy, attain jhanas. But Dandabhina, wisdom, the realization comes very slowly. But the majority of the people nowadays fall into the fourth category where it's called Dukkha Patipada, Dandabhinya, where the training is difficult. You find it difficult to restrain your sense faculties, to practice the precept, to meditate, and wisdom also comes very slowly. But still, we all fall into one of the four categories. What to do? You are what you have been in the past. So do what you can in this life, so you will be much better in future at what you do with regard to the Dhamma, the teaching. So you alone have to put in the effort. No one else can do it for you. It never works in that way. Even in the case of the Buddhas, Buddha said, we can only show you the way. It's up to you to practice. So these are the methods you have. You can read the sutta again. And in the end, Buddha says, Bhikkhu, yeah, in this way, if in the end, very end, Buddha says, this bhikkhu is then, if a person in this way able to practice by these 5 methods, if he is always able to abandon the unwholesome and instill himself in the wholesome, then Buddha said in the end, this bhikkhu is then called a master of the causes of thought. He will think whatever thought he wishes to think, and he will not think any thought that he does not wish to think. He has severed craving, fun of the fetters, and with the complete penetration of conceit, he has made an end of suffering. This is what the Blessed One says. The bhikkhu was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's word. So then, in the end, he becomes a person, he masters his thoughts, and he can think what he wants to think and not think what he does not want to think. So, if you want to be a master of your thoughts, this is the method, this is the practice. This is what you have to train in. So normally we are slaves of our thoughts now. So if you have to, if you want to escape from that slavery, this is the method. So that's the sutta for you. So may we all have the good fortune to escape this predicament of being enslaved by our mind and master our mind by practicing the teachings of the Buddha. Sadhu, sadhu.